Oh, welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. And we're doing an afternoon edition of the show. Why? A lot of reasons. Happy Easter week, everybody. The children are home. And this morning did not work out. This morning was not a good time for a show. So we're doing the afternoon. Now, in fairness, I'm going to give just a little bit of leeway here because I seem to remember on Monday saying, listen, there's a chance that Wednesday and Friday shows could be at weird times. Now, I did say I was going to kind of let you know ahead of time, so that one's on me. That is on me. However, welcome in. I'm very excited to see all of you out there on YouTube, Facebook, and X. We'll see who ends up finding the show this afternoon versus who's usually here in the morning. But today is a very Flyers-heavy show. If the Flyers aren't your thing, I got bad news for you. I am not here to break down last night's Phillies game because, in fairness, full transparency, I didn't watch it. I was down covering the last home game of this putrid Flyers season, game number 41 at home. The season is now, in my mind, pretty much done and dusted. We can all kind of move on with life, except we can't, because now all of a sudden, Thursday's game against Buffalo is muy interesante. And if you have been keeping up with the Flyers this season, and you've been keeping up with what's happening to this point, you'll know exactly why Thursday is such a massive game. Now, it's funny because I hurt some people's feelings, and I have to, I guess, apologize to some people in the Twitter sphere, because there are people who got very upset over the last few days with a few of my tweets. And so I'm going to offer a full, hearty, true apology to people who may or may not have been upset with some of my comments over on Twitter over the last few days. Because as I tell many of you, I like to try to be fair. I like to try to be transparent with people. And if I hurt somebody's feelings, I try to be a better human being, and I try to leave the Twitterverse a little bit better off than when I found it. And so I'm actually going to show you what I tweeted, and then maybe show you a couple of the things that people tweeted back, because that ultimately is something that I think matters. But I just want everybody to have a better general understanding of what it is that happened, and why maybe some people got upset. So let me pull over here really quick. I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to bring this tweet up, and Elon's got some kind of promote this to 100,000 people. I'd rather not. I don't want to promote my tweets. But okay, here we go, really quick. I brought this up yesterday afternoon. This is Tuesday afternoon. This is before the Flyers even took the ice against the Columbus Blue Jackets. I tweeted out the following. And again, I have to stand by what I tweeted. But I tweeted, the number of people who are too stupid to understand why finishing with a higher draft slot is staggering. It's not about the increased percentage chance of getting the number one pick, negligible. It's about avoiding getting jumped twice and knocked out of the top 6 in a 6-player draft. Now, in fairness, should I have called somebody stupid? Should I have thrown out the idea that somebody may have been stupid? Was it rude to claim that people were stupid? I'm here to offer an apology. And why am I going to apologize? Well, listen, in fairness, I think it's important that I also show you some of the responses to this, because, listen, we have this guy. Hold on, let's go over here to the comments. Invitation to reality. That's true. This guy lives in reality. Says, I swear you're not an actual fan of hockey. People who played the game don't give a fuck about this shit. They just play. No player will ever intentionally lose. It is what it is. W's in the last week are worth the same as the first week of the season. Quit crying. And so I would like to just go back to the original tweet, because this is what I deal with. I bring up the people who are too stupid to understand that the people like me who want to see the Flyers finish with a higher draft lottery position is because you're trying to insulate yourself in case 2 teams jump you. You would like to end up in the top 6 of what many consider to be a top 6 or a 6-player draft. Now, who says that? Scouts say that. Pundits say that. Some front office folks, those people tend to say it as well. That I'm just throwing it out there. May have talked to some people who may have some general idea of what's going on with this draft. But sure, I'm just some jamoke. I'm definitely not down there. I definitely don't have relationships with people in or around the organization. I definitely, Hunter, you got me. You got me. You don't. You don't got me at all. Random people on Twitter, but I'll go back to this. So somebody needs to point out to me, because this person could not where did I say in the original tweet that the players need to lose? Where did I say that the players need to actively try to lose? Where did I say that the players are failing the fan base by not actively intentionally losing? Oh, what's that? It's not in there. Okay, so case in point, back to the original tweet, but it got better. So I note the fact that there's been a lot of mediocre hockey, okay? And said, it'd be nice to get I like getting a choice of top players higher in the draft. It's not hard. And this person comes back. Again, do you think the players care?
It's not mentioned in the tweet. The tweet talks about the fact that you want to end up high in the draft so you can pick among those players and not fall out.
This is the whole thing. This has been the frustration, right? This has been where I've gotten so angry is not exactly the right way to put it. Because I don't feel in my heart of hearts, I don't feel angry when people don't get it. But there are people who just flat out don't seem to understand that you can live in multiple places at once. You can, on one hand, acknowledge the fact that players aren't going to actively try to lose and coaches aren't going to actively try to lose. And you can also note at the same time that your best chance of getting this thing turned around and sooner than later is to get elite talent. You are currently cap constrained, so free agency hasn't really been in play. Trade market hasn't exactly been in play. You're about to go into a very important offseason where you have 3 first-round picks and 4 second-round picks. That's draft capital that you could use maybe to move up, perhaps to move for a roster player. But in the meantime, you very clearly have something in your control, which is where you pick in this draft. And potentially you could pick high. I mean, I don't know if people have noticed this, okay, because there's people like this guy, right? I don't know if these people have noticed, but like one of the most exciting players on this Flyers team all season was young Matvei Michkov. And why? Because he's an elite talent. Like, I don't know why there are so many people who just genuinely seem to struggle with the idea that you would want to see your team pick high. You just suffered through a horrific season. No matter where you landed on the
Flyers should try to make the playoffs every year, even if their team stinks.
If you're one of those people, if you're one of the people who's like, take it, tear it all the way down to the studs. If you're somebody who's like me, who's like, organization's not going to tear it down to the studs. They're not going to be good enough. Hopefully you get to pick a little bit high. Wherever you're at, we all landed in the same place again, which is the Flyers have a legitimate chance of picking somewhere in that top 6. We'll break down the different positions and the different likelihood and everything here in a little bit. But it is mind-bending to me how many people just don't seem to get that. It has nothing to do with the players, their desires on the ice, how they're going to play on the ice, what you tell them, what you tell the coaches. That is a totally independent thing. You want your players to go out and believe they can win every night. And at the same time, you can hope that they lose because you know that the guys who are taking the ice right now don't have the difference makers you need to be able to win a Stanley Cup or to be able to be a cup contender year in and year out. It's not complicated. But for some people, it seemingly is. There seem to be people in the Twitter sphere, and certainly on Facebook, which is a very, very scary place in Flyers groups. There are people right now who, for whatever reason, believe Owen Tippett is going to develop into a 40-goal scorer. They think Tyson Foerster is going to be a 30-plus goal scorer. They think that Jet Lachenko is going to be Rod Brindamore reincarnate, or they think that he's going to somehow develop into being a 1C, and that passing on Zeev is not going to come back to bite them the same way that passing on Cole Caulfield twice to draft Cam York has come back to bite the team. No. It's definitely not history repeating itself. It's fine. Because there are some people who believe that every one of these Flyers players that's on the roster right now, that is a younger player, is going to develop into being somehow a top 6 forward or is going to somehow develop into being a game-breaking forward. I'm sorry, I live in reality, and as of right now, I haven't seen nearly enough from a lot of the young guys on this roster to believe that anyone outside of Matvei Michkov has the ability to get to that elite standing. It doesn't mean it won't happen. It doesn't mean that the door is totally closed on an Owen Tippett taking another step or 2, or Tyson Foerster taking another step or 2, or Bobby Brink taking another step or 2, or Noah Cates taking another step or 2, or maybe even 3. I'm not saying those guys can't do it. I'm saying that as of right now, I believe that there is a finite level that they can get to. There is a ceiling they get to. Now, whether or not that becomes a glass ceiling that they can shatter, maybe. But as of right now, I'm not exactly confident that you have a diamond in the rough right now on this team that can go to that next level. It doesn't mean it won't happen. I'm just We're being kind of honest here. We're being kind of realistic here. Okay. Now, there are people who still got even more upset about it. Now, listen, in fairness, am I sometimes brash over on Twitter? I guess I can be. If these people knew how brash I could be, they'd go cry themselves to sleep. Like, there was somebody who said, "Are you sure that you want to say that people are stupid? Is that what we should be doing in 2025? Yes, because when people are stupid, they are stupid. Sometimes you have to tell stupid people they're stupid. If you think I'm stupid, go ahead and feel free to call me stupid. Okay, but we can't just continue to let people believe that like they're functioning in some kind of intelligent society and they themselves are somehow intelligent just because they like to scream into the void. Like, that's not how this works. Now, there were more people that got very upset about a lot of this stuff, but it's not complicated. I have another person here that, this is where reading comprehension and media literacy, and I'm going to go out to the comments here in a second, but this is where reading comprehension and media literacy fails a lot. This is where a lot of people fail. So after last night, right, Flyers lose to Columbus, and while we're doing post-game on the Press Row Show, I'm watching the Boston game, and I watch Boston kind of give back the lead. It goes to 4-4, and then it goes to overtime. Boston does not look at all interested in scoring in that overtime. New Jersey wins. And so it forces a three-way tie at the time between the Kraken, the Bruins, and the Flyers, all at 76 points. Now, since that happened, Seattle is locked in at where they're at total point-wise. The Bruins are now locked in total point-wise where they are, and all that's left is the Flyers on Thursday against the Sabres, which, again, we'll break down here in a little bit. But I noted on Twitter last night that the Bruins getting the loser point in overtime forces a three-way tie. A Flyers loss against Buffalo, and I should have clarified, a regulation loss in Buffalo. You can't get the point. A regulation loss in Buffalo would lock in the number 4 spot in the draft lottery. Now, why am I pointing that out? Why am I playing some kind of semantic battle preemptively? Because read what the tweet is. Would lock in the number 4 spot in the draft lottery. Okay, now again, why do I get so frustrated? Why have I wanted to smash my head against a wall for much of the season? Because people can't read, or because people don't have the ability to see the words, comprehend, and then kind of piece it together. So here's a person. I don't know who this is, but this Ant Chatburn. Lock in? Really? So the lottery isn't happening this summer? I will once again point out here, would lock in the number 4 spot in the draft lottery. Because, for this person, for anybody who maybe doesn't understand, this is not just like a reverse, like chronological thing. This isn't like a reverse just based on points. That's where you're locked in, like in the NFL, right? It's a draft lottery. So you do, in fact, have to lock in your position in the draft lottery, which locks in your percentage chance of moving up to the number 1 overall pick, or maybe getting that number 2 overall pick, right? This has been pretty simple to this point, but again, some people can't wrap their heads around it. And thanks to Dirty Jers over here at Ginger with a Soul for pointing out that the tweet says in the draft lottery. And then this person continues. And this is where I just want to walk everybody through what I've been dealing with all year. I'm not looking for sympathy. I just want you to understand why I get to a point where I do kind of lose it. Just get this person. They aren't locking in anything in the lottery. That's the point. They are. They have to lock in their spot because it's a draft lottery. You have to eventually land somewhere in the draft lottery. It's how it works. And then they do the lottery. And then you get your pick. And then from you getting your pick, that's when you then go to the draft. Okay, so it's you play the season. You end up locking in your position in the draft lottery. The draft lottery happens. And then they do the draft. And then you get a player. And you hope that player turns into something good. That's how it works.
They aren't locking in anything. It's a lottery. That's the point. They could easily drop to the 6th. So what exactly has been locked? What are we talking about? They could drop to 6th. No shit. We've been saying that all year. The whole point is that you could get jumped twice. Try to finish in 4th. Finishing in 4th gets you to stay in the top 6 even if you get jumped twice. How many times do I need to explain this to people? Why do I have to keep explaining this to people again and again and again and again and again? And so then you just keep going. Clarify it. And then I love this, just to bring this home for you, because I'm an idiot apparently. This is the odds for the number 4 spot in the lottery. 9.5% chance of going up to number 1, 9.5% of getting second. Like, what are we doing? It is such a ridiculous place to be. Why, for the love of God, do people feel the need to try to explain things that are already understood? and then saying that I'm intentionally trying to create an expectation. I need somebody to understand, like, that you'll use to fuel misery clicks later. And then this person like said something about like, I get paid based on misery clicks or based on getting people upset around the phone. Can I just like pull back the curtain here? I don't get paid for clicks. I don't even write content anymore. I don't. I'm not like going over to Crossing Broad and writing like a takedown of the Flyers. I don't do it. And by the way, even when I was blogging back in the day at Crossing Broad, I didn't get paid based on click. I got paid based on like how many pieces of content I wrote. I got like a flat rate. It was like, just go gangbusters. And I did a really good job there. And I parlayed that into like a really good job that I'm very happy in. And has nothing to do with getting clicks on Twitter. And if it did, I would certainly be failing miserably. It's not like I have 100,000 followers on Twitter, okay? I put my thoughts out on social media about where these teams are. I give you as much of an honest opinion about the teams as I can. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. I like to think I'm right a lot more than I'm wrong. As Ford in the comments will point out, I was very wrong about the Sixers this year, and I can certainly accept the fact that while I didn't expect the entire Sixers team to end up pretty much hospitalized, I thought that they had a much higher ceiling, and I could admit that. One thing that the beauty of this show is on YouTube and wherever, it lives in perpetuity. You're not going to see me backtrack and try to gaslight you into, oh, I said X, when in fact I said Y. It's just not how it works. Hold me accountable. It's the whole beauty of the show. I see this kind of stuff with other people who do content, people who are on the radio, people who are on TV. They try to like backtrack. They almost try to make you feel like they never said something that they very clearly did. I don't do that. I just give you an honest assessment about where I think these teams are. And in the case of the Flyers, I think they're in a pretty good spot. I could make a case that the last couple of weeks since the firing of John Tortorella, this team has kind of played itself out of guaranteeing themselves one of those top 6 picks, right? Because in theory, things could go wrong here. We're about to break down those scenarios. But I don't get paid for the clicks. I really don't. I'm not trying to like get rich here over on YouTube or in the podcast feed. If people like enjoying the show and they want to interact, that's great. That makes me happy. When we have people in the comments, and there are a lot of people in the comments right now that I haven't brought up yet, but I will, like, that makes me happy. I enjoy doing the show. I enjoy interacting with people. But like, this ain't like a get rich thing. And it certainly isn't like the full-time job. It's not even close. I just do it because I enjoy it. But some of these people are insane. They're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And there were some other people who had even weirder interactions on the Twitter yesterday. Like, I got to tell you, I find it just kind of maddening, but it is what it is. Now, I want to get to some of the scenarios here. But before I do, I want to go out to the comments here really quick, because it's important to kind of take the full context of where the Flyers are at on Wednesday, April 16th, before they take the ice on Thursday night against Buffalo, and essentially solidify where they are going to be going into the draft lottery. So before we get to those scenarios, I'm going to go out to the comments here really quick. Facebook, X, and YouTube. YouTube is where most people live. If you want to join us on Facebook, you're more than welcome. If you're on X, you want to interact with the show, remember you have to click on the video first, go into old Periscope mode, comment there, and then I can pull you up on the screen. Okay. JH says, my other comment disappeared, but yakety sax on the power play, make it happen. Oh, Benny Hill, it'd be great. It'd be great. JH also says, new intro slaps. I have to change the intro song. I'll get into that at some point later this week. The intro song is going to change a little bit. I have somebody working on something new there. There's a very simple reason for it. I'll explain that once the new intro happens, but I enjoy having an actual intro instead of just having the static image to start the show. End of the show, there's another thing going out. I enjoy that too. There's like a new one that I'll be dropping or debuting, I guess, on the show today. Anyway, video guy Amadeo checks in over on YouTube, says, we all know they're winning Thursday. Why does this have to happen? Andrew Fawcett says, well, hello. Andrew, you should be getting a package in the next few days. It's going to be a good pack. Oh, it's the shirt. Andrew is getting an autographed shirt for Snow the Goalie, signed by all the hosts and intern Andrew. So that'll be coming your way soon. Ford is here. Says, packing for a trip but checked in. Enjoy the trip. Have fun out there. Kyle Adams says, let's get a community fund to pay a mobster to make the team take a dive on Thursday.
Oh, so I heard you're going to come up to Buffalo. Eh? I heard you might be thinking you're going to try to score a goal, huh? What if you don't score that goal?
It's a bad idea, Kyle. You can't do that. Ryan Reese says, Flyers have a chance of getting the 4th overall pick if they lose. Bet the house on the Flyers. Yeah, I think that in fairness is kind of what we all expect to have happen, right? We kind of all expect this thing to go sideways. There is a very clear and advantageous way to find success here and to get to that number 4 spot. But as some people like to point out, the Flyers can't help but get in their own way. Andrew also says, Russ pissed someone off? Nah. You know what the problem is? I don't even try to piss these people off anymore. I don't even know what to do. Fawcett says, Jason Martinez may have mentioned you by name on Flyers Daily. I don't know what that is. Was that today? Was that another day? Martinez is out here battling cancer. I saw him last night. I think I'll try to get him on this show, or maybe we'll have him over on Snow the Goalie, but he was down at Wells Fargo Center for the first time in a good long while as he's been battling colorectal cancer. So even if Martinez said something awful about me on Flyers Daily, I will let it slide this time. But it was really good to see him down there last night. If you haven't been following his journey, he's been kind of documenting it on Twitter, so send Martinez a lot of love. It was awesome. It was really, really cool seeing him down there last night at Wells Fargo Center, and he kind of chronicled what it was like to be back in the building and everything. So, good for him. It was awesome. So I mentioned about the reason that the draft positioning matters. Evan Adkins says your own co-host doesn't even get it. He's talking about Anthony. I will tell you, it's not complicated. It's genuinely not complicated. Ant and I still battle about it. We battled about it yesterday. Genuinely, I could not believe that he and I were arguing about it. It didn't happen on Press Row Show. But I was like, as I'm watching the Boston game yesterday, I'm like, well, scenarios, you want to end up at number 4. And he's like, it doesn't matter. I'm like, it does, though. He's like, all those players are the same, 1 through 6 or whatever. They're all the same. And I was like, but that's not the point. The point is get one of the 6. He's like, well, 7 through 22 are the same player. I'm like, yeah, that's why you don't want to finish at 7 to 22. Like, why is this so complicated for some of these people to get? I just don't understand. Let's see. JH says, the same people who were upset were the ones that you're talking about in the original tweet. Yeah, the one about how people are too stupid to understand. You get shifted down. You don't want that. Kenny Jones over on X says, WrestleMania week wearing an AEW hoodie. Looking forward to Dynamite as well. I'll be breaking it down on It's Just Wrestling. This is just the hoodie that I happened to grab this morning. I wasn't thinking about the fact that it's Mania week, but it is. And WrestleMania, in fairness, it doesn't have anywhere near the hype that it did going into WrestleMania 40 last year in Philadelphia, where I was at night 1. This Mania build has been pretty brutal. There have been good moments. I'll break that down on It's Just Wrestling. If you haven't done so already, go subscribe over on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. It's a very nice logo with some teal and some pink, and it's good. It's a good show. It's a good show. But we're gonna break that down. Chris Freed also says WrestleMania 41 card sucks. I would have a hard time arguing that. Evan also says Flyers keep saying the draft is very deep. Says that people are drinking the orange Kool-Aid. So, here's the thing. There have been people who, a year ago, when it came around the NHL Draft Lottery, or around the NHL Draft last year, kind of looking out at the following year, this one, they thought that this was going to be a really deep draft. And in fairness, there are still people who think it's a deep draft, but the high bar and the ceiling and all of that has changed. And so there is this feeling out there that there is no generational talent in this draft. Schaefer will probably go number 1. He's really the only top-regarded defenseman in that top 6. You have a few centers. You have a couple of wings. It's a good top 6. Probably none of those players are going to be ready to contribute next year. So no matter who you end up drafting, if you do draft in the top 6, it is not inconceivable, but it is unlikely that you're going to see that player suit up for the orange and black out of training camp next year. Is it possible that late next season, after a year of wherever they're going to play, that they could potentially get a look late in the season or maybe be brought in as reinforcements if this team is trying to make the playoffs? It's possible. Will it happen? I don't know. Joe Papel says, hey all, we need Kolosov to start tomorrow and give up 6 or 7 goals. Here's why it's a bad idea, though. And fundamentally, Joe, I could see a scenario where you could make that case, and it does make sense, but there's a downside to it. Alexei Kolosov knows that if he goes in goal tomorrow, he's playing for an NHL job. He's playing for his career. If tomorrow, like say he starts against Buffalo, right? It is the most important game of his life. Because if he puts on a show, if he stands on his head, it maybe gives his camp the ability to go to the Flyers and say, listen, we know that next year this is probably not going to work out. And Fedotov, in fairness, is probably in a similar boat. Not going to work out. We'd like to see if there's another team that would want to trade for Alexei Kolosov's rights. I wouldn't want that guy starting in net. If you're Ivan Fedotov, it's a similar thing, although there's more guaranteed money for next year. There's that second year of the contract. Whatever happens there, that remains to be seen. If you're Sam Ersson, it's just another day. And by the way, if Sam Ersson goes out and he plays a good game like he did last night, gives up 3 goals against Columbus, but has like a pretty good game overall, it doesn't fundamentally change the way the organization's going to feel about him. I think that some of the people who might have believed that Ersson was a number 1 goalie, those people are fewer and far between now within the Flyers organization. I don't think that at this point people are looking at Sam Ersson as being the number 1 going into next season. I think it's much more likely that you're going to see them try to bring in somebody, a veteran, who's either going to carry the load or is going to almost do like a 50-50 split with Ersson next year. I don't think they're going to be willing to go with Ersson and Fedotov or Ersson and Kolosov next year. I just don't see it. The only way that that happens is if you somehow, as a team, make the decision, we are going to try to do one more season of the rebuild, but you're really playing with fire there. Now, you have this incredible talent in Gavin McKenna that's coming out next year who continues to just light up the hockey world and light up the highlight reel and just take social media by storm. But this is where I can actually side with the people who say you can't tank in the hopes of getting that number 1 overall pick because, 1, there are still going to be teams that are going to be worse than you, which is true. And 2, it's not a guarantee you get McKenna. So if you're going to like burn another year, which would be the second year on Mishkov's deal, just to try to race to the bottom and then still not get McKenna, was it worth it? Now, some will argue that, yeah, it's still worth burning an entire year of a team to try to get that franchise cornerstone that you don't believe you have right now. As much as I like the idea of being able to get a player like that, I don't think I could actually stand here and say, like, yeah, burn another year. I think that it's probably about time, depending on where they draft this year and depending on who they end up getting. I think that you are going to have to start to pursue the path to whether it's an offer sheet of an RFA, whether it's trying to get creative in the trade market. I just think they're going to try to make the playoffs next year. And honestly, at this point, if you can get out of cap hell, you can put together a competitive team, whatever you choose to do at coach, whether that's something that ends up helping to bring players in or not, like, I think that their minds are sort of made up that next year is a year that you're going to try to actually take another step and not take a step back and not kind of default to the rebuild mode. Now, whether you agree with that or not is totally up to you, but I think that's where organizationally their minds are at. Things could change if they try to offer sheet somebody and don't get him, if they try to pursue a big splashy trade and it doesn't work out and they essentially roll out the same roster again next year, well, then you'll know that they are very much looking to draft high one more year, right? Like if this roster is mostly unchanged 2 or 3 months from now, it is a very clear indication that, like, all right, yeah, sure, you want to try to like give some of these younger guys more time and more time to develop, but you're essentially saying like, yeah, we get it, we're not going to win a lot. And that would be a really gutsy play. They would have to do a lot of PR. They would have to do a lot of public outreach to try to explain why they're doing what they're doing, even though many of us would kind of understand it, and we'd inherently understand if you roll back a very bad team or a team that isn't very good and you do it again, you're clearly not trying to win a Stanley Cup. All right, let's see. Colin Gamble says, they said on the broadcast that Briere thinks it's a 12-player draft. We might be cooked, fam. Listen, I think they're going to try to say a lot of different things, right? I wouldn't expect the Flyers to say, oh, yeah, it's a 6-player draft, and if we don't draft in the top 6, we're screwed. Like, I don't see that as a thing. I think they are going to try to tell you that there are more players because they know, God forbid, they fall in this draft. They don't want to have set the expectation that if you don't draft in the top 6, you're screwed. Like, listen, picking at number 7 is still in play. We'll eventually get to these scenarios. They could theoretically draft at number 7, or they could end up number 7 in the draft lottery and get jumped twice and then pick at number 9. So you can't paint yourself into the corner that it's a 6-player draft if you're the front office. I can do that because I don't work for the organization. I can tell you that everything I've heard, everything that I continue to hear, 6-player draft. Okay. Joe Papel says, a rebuild should have meant moving players like Frost, Farabee, Lawton, and Risto a year or two ago. We would have had a realistic shot at drafting Celebrini or Demidov. Instead, more third-liners. So I don't disagree with that fundamentally. I mean, for a couple of years now, I said Lawton getting dealt made sense. Risto getting dealt made sense. Lower the ceiling, lower the floor. We talked about that a lot this year. Right? You can go back and watch any of the episodes from throughout this season. Lower the ceiling, lower the floor is a shirt I should have made. But like lower the ceiling, lower the floor was my mantra, right? And the Flyers, when they traded Frost and Farabee, probably thought that they were going to hit the skids a lot worse than they actually did, because you would think that the playmaking of Frost being gone and the potential goal scoring of Farabee being gone was going to tank this team, and it didn't really happen. In fact, Kuzmenko made the power play better to some extent, and so then Kuzmenko got dealt. Risto is a total... I don't have anything to say about Risto right now that is going to help anything. The only thing I will point out is that for the second straight year, Rasmus Ristolainen has found himself injured at or around the trade deadline, at or around the end of the season, and that if somehow the Flyers had made the playoffs 2 years in a row, Risto would not have been available. I know that the long-held joke is playoff Risto. I don't know. Listen, if there's a team that's willing to trade for him this offseason, you take the trade, you go out and you try to find another big body, because that's clearly a concern, is that they have too many small defensemen. But, get a big body in here, and if you can get something of value for Risto, cool, do it. If you're going to try to make the playoffs next year, then I guess you're going to have to keep him. That is the conundrum they find themselves in, because they didn't move Risto earlier this season when I think they probably had a good chance of getting a decent enough offer for him. It's fine. I do think that they're going to move at least one of their defensemen this offseason. I cannot fathom a scenario where they're going to sign Cam York to a big contract, and if they do, I will call that out on this show and on Snow the Goalie. I would not re-sign Cam York to a big deal, a long deal, a high AAV deal. I would not. I don't really want to see them sign him to a bridge deal. I'd much rather just see Cam York get moved, because I just don't see it. And maybe he develops into some kind of stud that I just cannot foresee, but I just do not believe that player is in there. That's where I'm at. Flyers Purgatory over on YouTube says, the collective media around the Flyers have lost their damn mind. They cannot grasp the concept of 4th best pick and the 7th best pick and possibly falling 2 spots. They all talk about the odds of getting number 1. This is where my anger lies. This is where my frustration continues to lie. And so, with that in mind, I'm not going to bail here totally on the comments, but I do want to just point out what Flyers Purgatory is talking about, because this is where so much of the frustration that I have around the draft lottery and why people want to see this team lose on Thursday can still be good Flyers fans, but think that there's a better way to go about it and a better way to be a better team by drafting higher. San Jose, Chicago, and Nashville are locked in 1 through 3 in the draft lottery. If you look at the percentage odds of winning the number 1 overall pick, San Jose has a 25.5% chance. Good for them. 13.5% chance for Chicago, 11.5% for Nashville. Then whoever ends up being number 4, it could be the Flyers, it could be the Bruins. 9.5% chance versus number 5 gets an 8.5% chance, number 6 get a 7.5% chance, or number 7, where the Flyers could also end up, in theory, could they get to 8? I think they can. I think the worst they could do is 7. I don't even want to flirt with 8. But you see, it's a 1% difference as you keep going by picks, right? That's not what we're concerned about. That's not what people who are looking at the Flyers and what's best potentially for the team are looking at. What we're looking at is you get jumped twice. If you finish the season at number 6, where the Flyers are right now, and let's say Buffalo and Pittsburgh were to jump you in the draft lottery, you're now picking at number 8. And if it's a 6-player draft, that means you're not getting one of those 6 players. If you somehow fall to number 7, you get a regulation win against Buffalo, and then you get jumped twice in the draft lottery. Now you're picking at number 9. I'm sorry. It's a really hard pill to swallow, given the season that this team had, that you're not only not going to get to have your choice of a few different guys at number 4 or maybe number 5, but that you're not even going to get one of those players. That's where the frustration is. I'm really quick. We're going to sim the lottery. Let's just see. So in this, did that even do it? I don't know if that, we're going to spin it one more time. All right. So in both of these scenarios, the Flyers stay put at number 6. We'll go one more. They stay at number 6. We go again. They fall to number 7. This would be a bad scenario. Anyway, this is the whole point. This is the crux of the argument. This is why people get so frustrated. This is why people like me get so unbelievably frustrated. It shouldn't be that complicated. It shouldn't be something that has to get explained as many times as I've had to explain it. But again, there are people who exist on social media who just can't seem to wrap their head around it for whatever reason. So there is a big difference. There's a difference between finishing after the draft lottery in that top 6 or not. It's very simple. MM says, I agree, but this take is funny. Remember, the Oilers made a rule because the Oilers had so many number 1 picks that now you can only have 2 in 5 years. The funny part is the Oilers have never won a cup. And in fairness, that's the one that a lot of people like to point to. They go, well, listen, you have McDavid and you have a guy who's incredible in his own right in Draisaitl, and they still haven't won a cup. People like to point to the fact that Buffalo still stinks, despite the fact that Buffalo has picked high in the lottery for many years. I would argue that front office turnover and just bad scouting or bad front offices have led to bad players getting selected. I'd also point to the fact that, Buffalo did have a guy named Jack Eichel. Buffalo did have a guy named Sam Reinhart. Both of those guys get moved. Both of those guys go on to win Stanley Cups on better teams, in better organizations. Just how it works. It's not complicated. Joe Papel says I'm spot on. Thank you, Joe. Andrew Fawcett doesn't trust the ping pong balls. That's okay. AJ over on YouTube says, oh, hey, afternoon show. I actually kind of like doing the afternoon show. I just can't commit to it. That's why we do the morning show 3 times a week. Let's see. Andrew Fawcett says, let me remind you of the last 2 players the Flyers picked at number 2 overall, JVR and Nolan Patrick. World beaters, I tell you. Well, the worst part, if you go back, right, Patrick Kane instead of JVR really hurt. Nico Hischier over Nolan Patrick isn't really what hurts you that much. Because, listen, even if New Jersey fans were like, oh, we like Hischier, they probably would have rather have Cal McCarr, right? Like, all things considered. The frustrating thing is that you had Cal McCarr, you had Heiskanen, you had Elias Pettersson, all taken after Nolan Patrick. Any of them would have been better. You can't hold it against Nolan Patrick that he had concussion issues. There were other questions about, the internal motor and all that with Nolan Patrick, but we're not going to go there now because it doesn't matter at this point. Let me see. I'm going to keep going here really quickly. I said earlier that I won't gaslight you. I tell you how I feel. Ford says that he will make sure that I don't gaslight. Let's see. Chris Freed says, more interesting question right now is what will the new arena name be? Ant hinted at it last night. You have any info? I've heard 2 names for the arena, and I have to tell you, it doesn't matter because they're still in a really weird place with this arena. And if you haven't noticed, there have been no new updates about the Sixers and Flyers combined arena that took the world by storm a month or so ago, a month and a half, 2 months ago, when the Market East plan got abandoned and this new arena got announced. There's been no new update around the arena. Does anybody find that strange, interesting, funny? I do. There could be a few different reasons for that. That issue is potentially holding up the announcement of the new name for the Wells Fargo Center. Also, there have been no updates about what's going to happen at Wells Fargo Center once the new arena gets built. Are they going to use it as a secondary concert venue? Are they going to tear it down? No one seems to know. No one seems to know. All right. Video guy Amadeo says that he thinks that Shaw already mentioned Fedotov or Kolosov will start, something about rotating the goalies. Well, thank goodness. Allison says, hello, in Carline for school pickup. Good job, Allison. Let's see. All right, I'm going to go over to KDub1323 says, would be nice to totally stink next year and end up with McKenna. If you could guarantee me that tanking next season was 100% guarantee of getting Gavin McKenna if this were the NFL, I'd say absolutely tear it down. I'd say it's organizational malpractice not to try, right? But because it's a 20.5% chance or whatever, I don't see how, as a big market team, which is what the Flyers are, a team that's trying to build, a team that's trying to get their fan base back, trying to get casual fans back in, I don't see it. Let's see. King Alfred's U.S. descendant says, I'm so mad we were bad. We never should have let this team lose that much years ago. Said no Penguins or Blackhawks front office personnel at their multiple parades. I mean, that is your best case scenario, right? If you're a Pittsburgh, I'd even throw Colorado into it. I know that Colorado's losing happened over multiple years. I've brought this up before about how many times they picked in the top 10 and the top 5. They eventually won a cup. Eventually, in theory, if you pick enough times high enough in the draft and your front office doesn't stink and the scouts don't stink, you should have enough talent that if you fortify with a couple of free agents, you should be able to compete for a Stanley Cup. Let's see. I got some people here about Kolosov. Kyle says Kolosov wants to go back to Belarus. Seems like the kid doesn't care about being here at all. Andrew Foster says Kolosov is done in the NHL. He wants to go back to Belarus. I don't know if that's true. I do know that there have been a lot of things around Kolosov that would indicate there is a lack of willingness to go to the AHL, or a lack of, what's the best way to put it? There's not a lot of support from his home nation of Belarus to see Alexei Kolosov be an AHL goalie. I have not heard a single thing about Alexei Kolosov as a horrible guy, an asshole, a problem, anything, right? I think a lot of times people are trying to draw a lot of lines and they're trying to connect a lot of dots and they want to believe that Kolosov's a terrible human being. But I've not gotten that indication. It really does feel like, listen, he's the first goalie from Belarus to start as many games as he has. I'm trying to remember, there were like 2 guys, right? There was one that was like Canadian Belarusian or Belarusian Canadian or whatever, like in the 80s or the 60s or something. Like, he is, in theory, the most successful Belarusian goalie to come out in decades, right? And it's a small country, and like he's the pride of that small country. And so to them, the idea of him not playing in the KHL, but rather going to the U.S. and playing in their minor league is a step down. And if you are the guy who is essentially the face of Belarusian hockey, right, which is what Kolosov is, are you letting your country down? Do you feel like you're letting your country down? Are there people around you or in your camp or whatever that feel like you're letting everyone down by accepting an assignment to the AHL? Whether you as an American fan think that's fair or not is up to you. But I just get the feeling that there are a lot of pressures on this guy that probably aren't fair, and that if he were from virtually any other country, he would have happily been in the AHL all season, or he would have certainly been more accepting of it because there weren't these other factors kind of leaning on him. But I think that there's a lot of pressure that comes with it. It's not the same thing. Like, what's the best comparison? It's like if a young player in the NBA gets signed to a deal with like Jordan Brand or something, right? And then like they stink up the joint for their rookie season. And like there's a lot of pressure on them because you've been signed to this iconic brand and you were kind of being leaned on as the next generation of talent in the NBA, and then you puke all over yourself. Now all of a sudden there are a lot of external forces kind of weighing down on you or bearing down on you. Not exactly sure that that's what's happened with Kolosov this year, but like if you look at it, if you zoom out and you go macro view, there's a better chance than not that he's had other pressures on him besides his own desires to play in the NHL. Just saying. Let's see. Chris Freed says, can the Flyers front office survive another non-playoff season? Yeah, they're fine. They are fine. If the Flyers front office clearly articulated to ownership that they're going to try to rebuild one more year, and the idea is to try to pick high one more time, maybe have a shot at McKenna, they'd have the endorsement of ownership. The big thing would be make sure you figure out a way to sell that to the fan base so you're still getting butts and seats, you're still getting parking revenue, you're still getting people to buy jerseys. They would, listen, at the very minimum, right? Play out the scenario where the Flyers want to pick high again next year, which I do not have any indications they do. Play out a scenario in your mind where the Flyers want to pick high. The one thing they have to do, no matter what, no matter how they want to go about next season, trying to push for the playoffs, trying to push for a high pick, you have to get a center that can play with Matvei Michkov. You cannot burn a second year of Matvei Michkov playing with guys that just aren't up to snuff. Sean Couturier, really good dude, still working his way back from 2 back surgeries. He's not the guy to center Matvei Michkov and get the most out of him. There's nobody on this roster right now who's a good enough center at Mishkov's level. So you have to try to find that guy. Now, whether that leads to more winning than you want next year or whether that leads to less winning than you want next year, Doesn't really matter. You do need somebody who can unlock the next level of Mishkov. You can't have him just kind of floundering here for another year. Regardless of the path you want to take, that's priority number one. Sure, getting a true bona fide number one defenseman, very important. Getting a true number one center, very important. Getting a number one netminder, very important. Or like at least getting somebody who can kind of hold the fort down for a bit until like a Zavragan or maybe a Bjarnason or somebody that you believe highly in your system can come and take that number one spot. Their goal for next year has to be to go out and get a legitimate number one center or a 1A, a number two center that's good enough to play with Matvei Mishkov and get him to be an 80-plus point guy in year two to try to make him sophomore slump proof. That's what they have to do. In fairness, assuming they do a somewhat decent job, just about anybody that they have play on a line with Mishkov is going to be better than the kind of jockeying and the constant in and out of who he's had to play with this year. And again, he's done a great job. Maybe it's because Mishkov is still learning English and isn't as available to the media as everybody else, and you're not hearing him complain. But by all accounts, he's a very competitive guy, isn't complaining about the fact that doesn't have a great center to play with right now. All right, let's see. Sutliff says, I've been hearing about the great prospects and rebuilding since Hextall was GM. They need to try to win next season. That's why I think that they're going to try to push for the playoffs. Now, in fairness, I have not gotten the feeling to this point that Flyers fans have been gaslit by Briere and Jones. I have not seen, and if it's out there, by all means, let me know. I have not seen Briere and Jones talk glowingly about 7 prospects that are going to fundamentally change the trajectory of this organization coming in the pipeline. We know that there are good young goalies, Zavragan, Bjarnason, that they believe in longer term. We know that they believe that Jet Lashenko could be on this team next year and could be a difference maker. I did see a somewhat concerning thread of tweets by Alex Appleyard over on Twitter yesterday or the day before about being underwhelmed, we'll say, with the play of Lashenko since he's come over and taken the ice with the Phantoms. But I don't see the same kind of the kids are coming, like we saw when Hextall was GM. And even to some extent when Chuck Fletcher was GM. I don't see that. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. They're allowed to be excited about some of their prospects, but I haven't seen them say, oh yeah, the next guy's coming. In fairness, the one who is the most elite prospect, Matvei Mishkov, they went out of their way to try to tamper those expectations at the beginning of the year. Remember, go back to one of the early Snow the Goalies from this season when we sat down with Hilferty, Jones, and Briere. They talked about the marketing materials and how the marketing department kind of wanted to make Mishkov more of a focal point. He was on the billboards, but he's the 4th guy and he's in the back because they didn't want to make him appear to be the savior of the team. So if they're willing to do that with Mishkov, they're not going to then turn around and say oh yeah, these 3 guys that you've never heard of are going to somehow, they believe in Alex Bump. They're not talking about Alex Bump as being a guy who's certainly going to be on the team next year and is going to be a legitimate contributor. They're not talking about Oliver Bonk as a guy who's going to come up, oh yeah, he's got number 1D potential. They're not doing that. They're not gaslighting you. They're saying that they believe in those guys and that those guys are going to have a chance maybe next year to make a team or not. But I don't see them saying, oh yeah, the kids are coming. Difference makers. I don't see that. Bob Wright says, it feels like at this point the Flyers will eventually just have to pay for top talent to pair with Mishkov and Konechny. Pipeline seems clogged up with 3rd and 4th liners and 2nd and 3rd pair defensemen, which, okay, let me play the devil's advocate positive here, which I don't like doing, but I will try. If you have an organization that can churn out 3rd-line players that are going to be cost-controlled and weren't taken very highly, right? But they just develop into being 3rd-line players that are cheap. Is that the worst-case scenario? No. You would then hope that through trades and through free agency, you can fortify your roster and get those top 6 forwards that way. 2nd and 3rd pair defensemen, a little bit concerning. My concern is the lack of size on the blue line. And that is something I think they're going to have to address in this draft and certainly in free agency. Like I said, I don't see a scenario where they're going to pay Boku bucks to Cam York. I think it'd be a real misallocation of funds. You have to get bigger on that blue line. And again, I do think that what would be best for this team, just timeline-wise, would be to trade Risto, but you have to have a big body to replace him. You can't go into a season with like Emile Andre and Cam York and Jamie Drysdale taking up 3 of your 6 spots on the blue line. You can't do that. You need big bodies or bigger bodies. AJ over on YouTube, our resident Rangers fan, checking in here on a Flyers heavy day, says there's a difference between being a fan of this year's team specifically and the organization. When the Rangers blew it up a few years ago, I hoped for losses for the good of the future. And he goes, 2 Eastern Conference Finals later, I feel like we're at the end of our window, but I enjoyed the ride. And in fairness, a lot of Rangers fans are really upset. We talked about this last night on the Press Row Show, but Laviolette could be on the outs. Drury seems to be very well liked by ownership. There are a lot of toxic things that have apparently happened in and around that organization all season. It's been a disaster in New York, and yet there are rumors about Torts maybe ending up there. There are rumors about a few other coaches maybe having their eyes on the prize there. It's kind of a mess. We'll talk about coaches in a little bit. Len Hickey says, you yell so much on the show compared to the Press Row Show. Where's the rage coming from? I try to tone it down on Press Row Show, but there are times that I just feel like I need to let off a little bit of steam here on the show. Sometimes. Amadeus says we need retribution for Nolan Patrick and missing out on Patrick Kane. It would be nice. Let's see. Chris Freed says, with tariffs and trade war, it can easily end any dreams of a new arena in town. I don't think that's going to happen. That'd be pretty wild, though. Derek Lentz asks on YouTube, out of Frondel, Martone, or Higgins, who would you want the most for the Flyers? I don't totally understand why Higgins is falling down boards like he has. I still like him. I still like that player. The one that I'm actually more intrigued by, for better or worse, is McQueen. But it's the ultimate boomer bust. If you do end up picking at number 6 and McQueen is there, huge dude, big frame, center, but you have legitimate concerns around the body. And if the injuries are going to persist, you're lighting that pick on fire. But if the injuries do subside, you're getting what could have been the number 1 overall pick in the draft, maybe at number 6. Let's see. KW1323 says, what are the chances the Flyers back up the truck for Marner? I don't think they're very high. And I don't know why you would back up the truck for Marner. I think Marner's a good player. I think Marner's going to get overpaid. I don't see him being interested in this situation. I don't see the Flyers going out of the way. I think the Flyers are going to try to make a big trade. I would be shocked if they use the Colorado and Edmonton picks this year. Maybe they trade one of them for a 2026 first-round pick. They're just kind of punting to next year. Maybe one gets involved in a trade with a position player, an NHL caliber player. They try to upgrade the center position. I could see that happening. I'm just not totally sure. Zacho says, oh no, it's not 8:30 a.m. Russ, what happened? Let's see. Zacho also says, so ready for the draft and trades to be made. Shake up time, please. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it works. Now, I mentioned before about the potential of where the Flyers could end up. And this is where things get really hairy. Because as things currently stand, the Flyers are on 76 points along with Seattle and Boston. And as I mentioned, Seattle and Boston have now played their final 2 games of the year. So the number 1 tiebreaker is regulation wins. The Flyers are behind both of those teams. If the Flyers were to lose in regulation on Thursday in Buffalo, they would end up in a 3-way tie at 76 points. And because they have the fewest regulation wins, currently they're only at 21 compared to Seattle's 28 and Boston's 26. If the Flyers lose in regulation to Buffalo, they will move all the way up to number 4 in the draft lottery, preventing themselves from falling out of the top 6, even if they get jumped twice in the lottery. Okay, so we know that part is done. We know that part is good. If the Flyers were to lose in overtime on Thursday, they would finish with 77 points. And then it gets a little bit hairy. They still have fewer regulation wins than Buffalo, believe it or not. Buffalo has 28 regulation wins. That would still not be ideal. If they beat Buffalo, they would end up at 78 points. And if they, let me think, hold on. Pittsburgh has a game to play. They could end at 78. The Flyers could end at 78. Pittsburgh would still have 23 regulation wins. The Flyers would then be at 22. I think the Flyers would end up at 7. Buffalo would move back to 6. You don't want to win. That really is the goal here. The idea is lose in regulation. Losing in overtime, not ideal. Winning that game in any way, very, very bad. Oh, it's, you know what, if they lose or if they beat Buffalo in overtime, they'd be tied on points with Buffalo. They would still remain higher than Buffalo in the draft lottery. You just don't want to win tomorrow. Now, again, the players and the coaches are going to try to win. Flyers fans are allowed to hope that their team doesn't win. These two things can be true at the same time. The only other thing that I wanted to hit on today is the coaching situation, because last night was really interesting. Talked to a few more media people than I usually get to during a game and after a game. And listen, nobody has legitimate insight right now into what's going to happen out in Vancouver. There is an option on Rick Tocchet's contract. The word has been that if Tocchet's contract gets picked up for next year, if that option gets picked up, he may become the highest paid coach in the NHL, which to me is insane. Now listen, Tocchet is a guy that I'm sure would be a lot of fun to cover. I'm sure he'd be a fun person to have on Snow the Goalie. There'd be a good relationship there. But like, Tocchet hasn't won. Tocchet hasn't won in a meaningful way in this league. And I get it. He coached out in Arizona, and we know that that organization was an absolute dumpster fire. Yzerman at some point had said apparently that, you know, he regretted letting Tocchet go like he did in Tampa. The Vancouver thing hasn't exactly worked out well. I'll also point out the fact that for better or worse, things got so bad in the locker room this year in Vancouver that they dealt JT Miller, but like there were also questions about whether or not Vancouver would trade Elias Pettersson because of how things like seemingly fell out, presumably between Pettersson and JT Miller. Do you want to have somebody that comes into this town where like the locker room seems to be in a better place overall? Do you want to see it potentially devolve? Now, in fairness, I'm not saying Tocchet is to blame for Pettersson and Miller falling out or for whatever kind of things were going on there. From all accounts, it sounds like Vancouver has had issues in that locker room for years. And like, listen, if you have somebody who is truly toxic in that locker room, it doesn't matter who the coach is, you're going to have to try to figure out a way to deal with it. But like, Tocchet's not young. He's not old. I think he's 60. But like, he's, you know, he's only ever gotten to the playoffs twice. And so if you're talking about like guys that should be the highest paid coaches in the league, is Rick Tocchet a guy that like has done enough to justify getting that kind of money? Which could be like, I don't know, has he won $5 million, $5.5? If you get to like $6 million, that makes you the highest paid coach in the league. Do you want 6.5? Do you want 7? How much do you want? Just did a little fact check of myself. Tocchet's 61. He just turned 61 a week ago. Now again, that shouldn't be a disqualifier. And I'm not saying that David Carl is like 100% going to be a great NHL coach. I'm also not convinced he's going to leave Denver. I have no idea. It's going to have to be the perfect situation. But I'm very much right now finding myself in the position that I think that the Flyers should try to keep Brad Shaw for a year, maybe give him a 2-year contract. He's not going to be able to somehow finagle $5.5 or $6 million out of you. There's not much of a track record. There's certainly not a lot of a track record as a head coach in the NHL. So to that end, like, why get yourself locked into a multi-year or a very long contract at a high value? You did that with Vigneault. You did that with Tortorella. Neither of them really worked out the way that you wanted them to. See if the winning that the Flyers have done this year since the firing of Torts, which has gone beyond the new coach bump, see if it was real. Maybe Brad Shaw is a very good head coach and his message resonates in that locker room. Maybe. I don't know. But I'd rather give Brad Shaw a 1 or 2 year contract at not a horrible number and see if it matters. See if this team develops. And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, you cut bait a year early and it's fine. And then next season, you go into the offseason looking for a head coach that you think is going to be able to move this thing forward. I know it's not an ideal scenario. I know that there are people who are going to want to see the Flyers go out and make a big splash. The only guy that I could see maybe hitting the market, even though I think it's unlikely, the only guy that I think could hit the market that would get almost universal approval within the Flyers fandom is Rod Brind'Amour. Like, the scenario goes as follows, right? Because if you remember, around the Rantanen thing falling apart in Carolina, Brind'Amour came out and said that Rantanen said when he got to Carolina, there were 4 teams he was willing to play for, and Carolina wasn't one of them. That wasn't a great thing because it put a lot of questions and doubt on the GM. And listen,
GMs and coaches and all kinds of front office executives, they all have an ego, right? They have to. You can't get to those positions in life without having at least a little bit of an ego or self-belief. If Carolina flames out early in the playoffs, and at some point Brind'Amour maybe says something publicly about how, well, it would have been good to have a guy like Rantanen or to have whatever that is, or to have Natchez instead of having traded away Rantanen, who you then had to get rid of because he didn't want to sign here. Like, if that kind of thing were to play out, maybe it becomes a power struggle, and maybe ownership says to the GM, you know what, make a change. Or if the GM goes to ownership and says, listen, he's being a malcontent. He's insubordinate as the head coach or whatever. If Brind'Amour hits the market, there are going to be like 6 or 7 teams that are going to line up. There are going to be other teams that are going to be willing to fire their coach to hire Brind'Amour. He'd be the one that's like, I think for the most part, probably gets damn near close to unanimous support because of the success he's had in Carolina. There will be some people who say, oh, former Flyer again. But like, I think that he's probably the most intriguing name. But again, I don't think that's going to happen. Didi Skinner says, yeah, give Shaw 2 years, then see what the best match is at that time. Landros says he's more concerned with Briere than Shaw. Didi says, we're not ready. We're not splash ready. Chris Freed says, Brindy has become Mr. Hurricane. He's not leaving that organization. Listen, in fairness, there are a lot of people 2 months ago who thought the Torts was going to be in the Flyers organization for a long time, too. And we saw how that ended. JH says, the only splash I'm ready for is the one from jumping into the summer pool. We're getting so close. We're getting so very close. All right, listen. I think that's a good place to wrap up for today. We talked about all the different scenarios. Flyers, if they lose in regulation on Thursday night, will have the 4th spot in the draft lottery, which means they, at worst, would draft at number 6. They're in really good shape, potentially. Good on them. We'll see how it goes. But they take on Buffalo on Thursday night. That is a massive game for this team. It is a massive game just to have a little bit of flexibility to try to decide who you might want a little bit higher up in the draft instead of being at the mercy of whoever falls to you, or God forbid you fall to that next tier where it really is a crapshoot. Again, there could be a diamond in the rough from like 7 to 20. But as of right now, a lot of these people, a lot of these pundits, a lot of these scouts are saying 7 to 20, very similar players, and they're at a tier below 2 through 5. Right now, Schaefer is kind of viewed as the number 1. Then you have 2 through 6, and then you have 7 through 20. They're all different tiers. We'll see. We went through all those scenarios. We talked about the coaching situation. I got to light a few people on fire from Twitter, and I think it was a good day. Good day, good show. I enjoyed the number of people that were here live, by the way. A much higher number across YouTube and X especially with the afternoon show. If I commit to an afternoon show, if I could, I would, just based on that, or based in large part on that. But this kind of is what it is. I should be back on Friday morning, 8:30 a.m. with the Russ Joy Show. Should be, is the key. It doesn't mean that it is a guarantee to happen. It doesn't mean that it won't happen. But what it does mean is that there are always things that could go awry. All of the small children are going to be home on Friday as we get ready for Easter weekend. So, kind of bear with me. If the time shifts again on Friday, try not to hold that against me too much. Okay, that's, it's my only request. But until then, until Friday, this has been the Russ Joy Show. We're going to keep our fingers crossed that things go the way that we kind of want them to in that last game against Buffalo. Remains to be seen if it will. We will try to catch up with how the Phillies are doing on Friday. We'll see if there's anything else that's worth bringing up, that's worth talking about on Friday's show. What I can tell you is that Friday's show is going to be one that you will not want to miss, because there are going to be thoughts going positively or negatively about what happens with the Flyers Thursday night. We'll touch on the Sixers. We'll touch on the Phillies. We'll touch on the Eagles. We'll touch on the Flyers. We might even talk a little bit about the Philadelphia Union, who very much look like they've come back down to earth. We'll get into all of that. In the meantime, do me a favor, like the video, share the video, and subscribe if you're over on YouTube. If you're on Facebook, you can hit that with a like as well. That's always greatly appreciated. And if you are a podcast listener, or if you like podcasts better, or maybe you start a show on YouTube and you like to finish it in a podcast feed, you could certainly do that. The show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. So until Friday's show, this has been the Russ Joy Show, but you knew that already because, well, you're watching it. This has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that
because you're smart and it's also the name of the show. I'll talk to each and every one of you Friday morning here on the Russ Joy Show. Have a wonderful Wednesday. I'll see you on Good Friday.